It's always good weather.
Yeah, it looks pretty awesome over there. All right, we're live. Yeah, welcome everybody. So this podcast today is with Steve Barbour of Upstream Data, Marty Bent of a number of different things, but relevant to this discussion today, Great American Mining. And it's going to be a discussion probably about a lot of stuff, but hopefully we touch on Bitcoin mining and the legacy energy infrastructure and system as part of that. But before we do, Scott Sibley is here to shill his Bitcoin project. Scott, why don't you hit us with the spiel?
Perfect. Well, thanks, John, and thanks for everybody else for having me on to start the show. So a few months ago, I launched a Bitcoin card game called Shamaray. So take a look at it right here. The purpose of it really was to try to find a way to start embedding myself in the community and really give back through an educational type product. So the purpose of the game is really to create a low stakes, barrier to entry way to have young kids and old adults play something around Bitcoin. The way the game's played, it really focuses around mining. So that's where the game name comes from, a mixture of SHA-256 and the game of memory. And being able to use that kind of concept to play a fun game takes 10 or so minutes to create a blockchain. There's blockchains, there's attacks, there's difficulty adjustments all through different cards with fun characters on it, and a nice dice, and be able to go out and play that. And excited to have the feedback I've had over these past few months from both adults and especially the parents that have been playing with their kids.
So is the idea to teach people how Bitcoin mining works? Is that the idea?
That would be almost secondary. Really, the first idea is just to bring awareness. So I have a background in ed tech and a product that we work on around just bringing awareness to career exploration. And so I saw the value in that, and just low stakes, learn what the word Bitcoin is, learn the terms around an attack, a blockchain, as something that, as young as a 5-year-old can come in here and just putting it in the back of their head. So that maybe whether it's 5 months from now or 5 years from now, they remember that was part of their concept growing up that they became aware of. That's really the baseline that I was going for.
Interesting. And
do you get to reorg people out of existence? Is that what?
you get reorg out of existence, but you can. There are those difficulty adjustments in there that you can start layering in. And actually, one of the fun byproducts that I've heard from parents is how kids who are hyper competitive, after they played it once, and let's say they ended up with 4 rewards at the end and their sister got 5, and they felt like they lost. The second time they played, they realized, wait a minute, we're all in this together. We're trying to mine this blockchain before it gets attacked. And if we do that, we all win something. And then the parents have actually been correlating it back to, okay, this block reward is worth X amount of dollars, and trying to kind of bring that life cycle into play there too. So it's been a fun learning experience for me.
Has it been effective at red pilling youngsters and their parents alike?
I think so. I mean, really from the parents, I'm sure it's been out there. I think so many of the purchases so far have been people who have been red pilled already. So they're probably playing with their friends, but I've definitely heard people saying, I've had multiple people say, hey, I was upstairs in the office and I heard my kids chanting Bitcoin, and I came downstairs and they were just sitting there playing the game, which I think is probably the biggest pill you could give them to start.
The stuff of dreams, to hear your kids chanting Bitcoin upstairs.
Exactly. And I'm no joke. I've heard that multiple times from parents. So it's cool to see.
Cool. And when did it launch?
So I began shipping in July, began taking pre-orders in April. It's been something I've been working on for a little over a year now. And so it's been fun. Got about 300 or so games out in the live stream. I actually just sent 2 off to Ghana and Nigeria about an hour ago. So it's spreading around the world.
Cool. Any interest from, educational institutions?
Yeah, so actually it is a STEM authenticated product. So I went through the process of getting that authenticated to be able to help that adoption. There is some light interest to begin with, obviously, especially here in the States, the issues going on with the school system today. It's not exactly the time to start bombarding them with Bitcoin and this sort of thing. But I believe that authentication will really help kind of lead that way, whether it's a traditional school, homeschooling, or kind of STEM academies and that sort of thing. So I'm excited about that path as well.
Sick. And I think I saw you sponsored BitBlock Boom, or everyone that went got one in their loot bag, sort of thing.
They did. So everybody there. So hopefully, Marty, you found yours in your bag, and the was able to get that out there, which was hopefully well received. I look forward to hopefully being there in person next year, and I do plan on being Bitcoin 2021 in LA later on next year.
Yeah, I was bummed I couldn't attend BitBlock Boom, but hopefully 2021 will be happening and travel
Yep.
restrictions will be less.
Yep.
Sweet. Well, guys, you got any questions for Scott?
I was gonna say my son's only 7 months old right now, so I can't wait till he's mentally cognizant enough to play the game.
Exactly. And like I think I mentioned this into the message with you, Marty, but I have a 1-year-old or just over one, and she's obviously too young to play too, but she's obsessed with just the characters. So we have this little stickers on her sippy cups, and she has her own card deck that she carries around. So it's even that just little awareness, bringing it into that 7-month-old or 1-year-old is really cool to see.
Yeah.
Nice. If people want more information or to go to the website and check it out, where should they go?
Yep. So the website is just shamari.com. So they can find that there. Feel free to order all they want. I did make a promo code for any of your listeners. So if they drop in rapid fire 10, they'll get 10% off. So feel free to use that. Twitter is the most active spot outside of that. So play Shamari is the handle, or myself, Scott M. Sibley. And I'm happy to engage in any of those forums to hear feedback, suggestions, and ideas.
Awesome, man. Well, look, I'm really eagerly awaiting my order so I can play with some family members or any other enthusiasts that are willing to play such a game with me. But thanks for coming on and explaining it a bit, and best of luck.
Perfect. Thanks for having me on. Enjoy listening to the rest of the show.
All right. See you, brother.
Take care.
See you later. Bye.
He's got
Bye.
All right. So guys, I know a lot of listeners will probably be familiar with the two of you, but for those that aren't, why don't we just get the normal intros out of the way? Marty, why don't you kick it off first?
Yeah, so I'm Marty Bent. I write a daily newsletter about Bitcoin, Marty's Bent, and host a podcast, Tales from the Crypt. We have an interview series and a weekly news show and rabbit hole recap that I co-host with Matt Odell. Matt joins me in the interviews sometimes as well. And then the reason I'm here today is my work at Great American Mining. I lead up business development efforts. I guess you could say there's no real title, but I'm just trying to spread the word and make connections. And at Great American Mining, we are focused on bringing hash rate to the United States. And the way we do that is by using waste gas and oil fields or midstream providers to mine Bitcoin.
Cool. Yeah, I'm Steve Barbour, engineer by background, owner of Upstream Data. Similar to GAM, we basically are a supplier for Bitcoin mining data centers and gensets, depending on the case, for oil field. So been doing it for a while and slowly growing and getting more traction. So it's a fun industry to be in. Nice.
Before we break into that industry specific stuff, I think we got to talk about Michael Saylor's and Microstrategy's recent news, and I don't know if you guys caught the appearance on Pomp's podcast, but hard to not be excited by hearing his articulation of his motivation and reasoning and logic behind the move, and then just how completely orange pilled he seems to be, and how I mean, he sounds like one of us, basically. You know, you could swap him out for any one of these podcasters and he would sound exactly the same. What were your guys' thoughts?
I was able to listen to podcasts. I thought it was great. Huge shout out to Pomp and Michael for putting together an incredible episode. And yeah, I mean, it was really cool towards the end of the podcast to hear his learning curve and the sources that led him to come to the conclusion that he did and convinced him to put $500 million of his company's money into Bitcoin. And I just think it was really cool to hear him cite people like Parker Lewis, Seyfedina Moose, Pomp, and just individual content creators that have been putting in hard work for the last few years to help educate newcomers, and see that hard work paying off in the form of $500 million investment into Bitcoin by a publicly traded company is just really cool, and highlights the organic nature and grassroots nature of the system.
Yeah, it's great to see the constant shilling and education out there actually making huge impacts, because that's pretty substantial to put that amount of money with such a big company to hold Bitcoin as a reserve. I mean, the way I see it, like, you know, if Bitcoin keeps doing its thing, right, like we expect, basically any businesses not holding a Bitcoin reserve are going to be destroyed by their competition that do. So, I mean, their competition is going to be protected better from wealth destruction. And if Bitcoin price keeps appreciating, how do you compete with that? Like, you got to hold some coins. So it's a good move by Microstrategy for sure.
Yeah, I found it interesting that, two things really, like you were saying, Marty, that, and I know we all know, we get messages from people saying like, keep up the good work, love your content, help me out with this and that. But you're talking into a mic and a screen most of the time. You don't realize that these ideas and concepts are really kind of permeating out into the broader world. And as you said, like he mentioned, all those sources. I think he mentioned the bullish case for Bitcoin as well. And like, one, it's kind of just cool that the message, that's how they're getting the message. But two, I know a lot of us come at this and we say we don't need validation. Like we've come at this through like rigorous assessment of the bigger picture to the extent that we can put that together. And we think we're being reasonable when we come to this, our appraisal of Bitcoin. But to see other people that have, achieved a high degree of success, consult similar resources, look at the picture in a similar way, and come to the same conclusion is just, I mean, I guess more than anything, it's exciting, because I think we kind of equivocated a bit, or we were at least being conservative by saying once organizations see this, whether they be public or private, maybe even governmental, they'll take a conservative allocation because it's a risky, volatile, et cetera, asset. And like, at least in this case, it turns out, no, someone was looking at a gigantic cash pile and saying, this is not good. What's happening to this? I think he used the term, it's like an ice cube melting or something. And looked around at the entire landscape of things that can be done about that to preserve that capital and maybe even grow it. And having come to such a resounding conclusion that Bitcoin was the best way to go. And I got a quote here from the podcast. I think it was my favorite part. But he said, this wasn't from the podcast. This was from a CoinDesk article. He said, "This is not a speculation, nor is it a hedge. This was a deliberate corporate strategy to adopt a Bitcoin standard." I think I can speak for all of us when I say we didn't.
Very bullish.
Yeah, we didn't expect that to be the next step in this process. So, pretty interesting times.
Very interesting. And again, it's crazy how, because he said he wasn't even paying attention in 2017, didn't really start paying attention until, I believe, in the last year. And the way he was able to explain Bitcoin, how he understands it, was actually pretty loose. I think for the subject of this episode particularly, I think he did a great job of explaining proof of work and the fact that individuals and miners are working as hard as possible to preserve the ledger and make sure that your value is preserved in the form of your UTXO, not moving or being double spent or reorged. Or didn't say that specifically, but that was the gist of it. Like the network is constantly working to protect your value, is what he distilled it to, which I think is a very succinct explanation of what Bitcoin is as a network.
Yeah, I mean, I think, big companies and firms and big names like him, when they make announcements like this and do things like this, it just boosts the credibility like so much. Like, I don't really know what Microstrategy really does as a business, but like their competitors have to be looking at them now and wondering, like, what the hell is this about? And any other big institutions anywhere, like when they see businesses like this do make decisions like this, and certainly over time, if they pay out, it just snowballs, I think.
Yeah, so. And I think all of Wall Street and fund managers, et cetera, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, right? For them to announce a move like that, and to have, I think yesterday their stock was up 9+%, and after the original announcement, it was up 15-ish, thereabouts. Like that's the market saying we approve of this move, right?
Stacking sats makes the stocks go up. Like, let's do it.
Yeah. I don't know if this is going to come through, but I put this out on Twitter a few minutes ago because it was just such a...
I don't want to hear that you've got a new idea and you're upset over transaction fees and you would like to implement smart contracts, so you got to change everything. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear that you're going to defend the network to the death against someone that's going to break it or compromise it in any way, shape, or form.
I mean, come on.
I don't want to hear that.
Like you said, Marty.
Ethereum's wrecked, eh?
Like you said, Marty.
Ethereum's wrecked, eh?
But like this is the dude, like you said, Marty, that basically started learning in March, and this many months later, that's where he's at. So we were talking before we started about how fucked up COVID has been, and how it's been divisive and it's really messed with a lot of people's lives. But he said in the interview that it gave him a chance to slow down. The normal routine of life got kind of interrupted, and he had time to not only consult the material for himself, but send it around to his board and his executive team and say, I think he called it homework, and was like, check this out, check this out, check this out, and then we'll talk about it. And he also interestingly said that I think the process after they decided to do it was like between a 3 and 6 month process to actually purchase the Bitcoin on the company's balance sheet. And I think he made allusions to a reference to the fact that others are probably considering it after their announcement and what the result of their announcement was. And so the clock is ticking, whether it's 3, 4, 5, 6 months before there's probably more announcements of a similar kind.
Yeah, I think I heard Jeff Booth on a podcast, I forget which one it was, in recent weeks, saying that he's hearing these conversations happen in corporate boardroom. It's inevitable. I mean, I think the ice cube metaphor that he did a really incredible job of distilling the situation and the value prop of Bitcoin visually. Like the ice cube metaphor was perfect. I got this cash sitting here and it's just melting away. And I think, again, it's the perfect game theory of Bitcoin. Bitstein, Michael Goldstein, has one of my favorite tweets. The Bitcoin is a game where the only winning move is to play, and it's starting to play out in real time. I mean, it's something we've believed, I think I can say confidently, for years now, and it's just really cool to see it hitting corporate boardrooms.
Yeah. Speaking of which, one aspect of this narrative getting out to more people, and people this year having taken the time to learn about Bitcoin more deeply, is that it's finding its way into other industries. And this is my kind of segue into discussing what you guys are up to. But the Bitcoin and the confluence of Bitcoin and the unique solutions that it provides to the energy industry is, I think, one of the most exciting things that's going on. Like, we all love price action. It's great when, a public company announces they're buying Bitcoin, but in terms of like really creating effectively a new industry, what you guys are up to is super exciting. And it ticks all the feel good boxes, right? Like, it's good for the environment. It makes financial sense. It, will probably have a dramatic impact on our energy industry over time, a good one. So I just wanted to get you guys together today to like kind of give me a state of the union, like what's going on with both your respective companies, but also the industry. What are the legacy people that you guys are talking to? What kind of things are they saying? How, you've been working with some for a while now, I assume. Like, once they've seen some results, are they just like, do they want to hook up more wells or whatever that they have? Like, I just want to dig into that. So Marty, Steve, why don't you, I'm seeing your video right now on my screen. So why don't you go first and just giving us a state of the union? You've been at it for a few years now.
Things have been snowballing, I guess. Like, probably the best story I have is relating to like how, oil producers have sort of about turned on this. Is, the first site I was on, it was actually the second site I was on. The first site, when I built my prototype in 2017, I went on this one site. It was sort of a friend of a friend site. They lost their gas. And then my business partner, his neighbor was also worked for an oil producer. They're a big company. Like, they're not like in major, but they're like a medium-sized publicly traded oil company, like pretty big deal. And so my neighbor worked for them, and he's more of a cowboy like me. Like, he thought it was a great idea. He didn't really get Bitcoin, but he's like, okay, you'll put this rig on our site. It's going to be pretty low overhead, low cost. It's going to help this problem, because he was already looking at like putting a gas compressor on the site and tying a pipeline into the next lease over. So that's like the traditional solution, right, for conserving the gas. But it's expensive. You need a big compressor skid, and you need to build a pipeline, which is sunk cost. But the nice part about this story was like he was gung ho for it. We did the deal. It was like a cowboy deal. There was no paperwork done. I just picked it up one day, moved it over, had it set up within a couple hours, like plumbed in, running, and it solved his problem. It was perfect. He was loving it. But then what happened was his management caught wind of it, right? And publicly traded company. This was 2017. Okay, like this was early 2018 when this happened. I had built it and deployed it first in 2017, but I moved it in early 2018. So the bull run had just come and gone. And I was out at this point knocking on oil producers' doors, like trying to see if like come on, like what do you think of this and stuff, like, and that's where I come from, as oil patch. So had a lot of contacts to go chat with, but at least these guys didn't go through the proper approval processes, and that maybe pissed off management. Anyway, they ended up not liking what was happening because they weren't sure what like their shareholders would think like of this whole Bitcoin thing. They sort of thought that they were giving their gas away for free. Like they thought I should be paying them a bunch of money for it, which I wasn't. I was just getting, at that time, I was just burning it for them. Like it was just a free disposal option for them. Anyway, they wanted to charge me a bunch and do all this stuff. So I just said, all right, screw it, I'm just leaving. So I went to a new site. And about a year later, like a year and a half later, they finally called me up, and now they're my best customer. We have like about a half dozen units like running for them right now. They bought a bunch. I got some out there just running with them. So in that time, something switched in upper management where they started to, I think part of it was, well, they realized like, well, that guy was actually doing us a pretty valuable service at that time, because they ended up going and buying a compressor and putting in a pipeline. And as anyone in oil field knows, like a lot of these upstream wells, all kinds of things can happen. They deplete, obviously, but they could have like catastrophic events, like they water out and they just stop being productive. So you sink all this money into this stuff, and it's just like super expensive. And so yeah, now they're the best customer we have. So like a lot of that had to do with, well, one, it took them time to see that, okay, there's actually a value proposition here aside from buying the equipment and like earning money itself. It's actually solving a problem. It took them a while to sort of like that to click, I guess, for the entire company. And the other thing is just, I think the whole credibility story, like the more we hear stories like this Microstrategy, which is quite a big deal, I think, and all the other things we see on a day-to-day basis, just the little things that like more and more people adopting it, all the good news stories in this space, like it adds up and it boosts the credibility. And that's the kind of thing that I think really changes the mind of these guys. And it's been really good for us. Like we've slowly but surely getting more and more stuff out there.
Yeah. And I probably should have got you to start this off, because I just assume a lot of people listening will know exactly what it is you guys are doing. But for those that are coming at this for the first time, can you just explain what it is, the product and service that you provide to these oil fields is?
Yeah, we just we're all just basically putting natural gas gen sets, like generating power off the natural gas, which is a portable piece of equipment, and then sending that electricity or consuming that electricity with a Bitcoin mining data center. So it's just all like there's different products. Like Marty's got a different container than we build. We build different things, and there's other guys out there building stuff. But it's all about modular, portable ability to. I call them like portable. When I'm talking to a new producer, I describe them as like a portable sales point for your gas. You can just sell the gas like right where it is, or depending on the conversation, if we're marketing it as a conservation option, like, okay, you can conserve your gas and then you don't have to pay carbon tax or whatever the deal is. Different ways to describe it. But
and how's COVID situation affected you guys, like this industry and this work? Because am I right in assuming that some wells and sites would have been closed for a period of time due to COVID?
Yeah. So COVID, obviously, with the shutdown of the economies, is decreased demand for oil and gas considerably, or at least did for a time period. So a lot of wells are very, or all wells are very revenue conscious and profit conscious. And as soon as oil dips below a certain price, they have to shut in wells. And that happened in March when you had the 1 month forward contract trading or futures contract, trading in negative territory. So since then, I think that, especially here in the United States, with the shale play, woke a lot of producers up to, whoa, like we've got to explore other options of how to be more profitable and explore other revenue streams. So I think for us at Great American Mining, that's when we started to see a lot more interest, particularly after that in March. And people have been much more open to conversation since then.
And it's been a double-edged sword, or it's been negative, let's say, for my business. In a lot of cases where we're on oil wells, it was negative because they shut in those wells temporarily because they weren't making any money. So then the gas is shut in. So I had a period of downtime for some of our rigs, and then some of the rigs I'm hosting for third parties. We got through all that and we got everything back up and running. But it's also, there's positives too, because like, for example, we finally did one site where, because what happens is, like, especially when, in a lot of cases too, like the upstream oil wells are still profitable, they kept them running, but then the downstream infrastructure for various reasons wasn't, and so they'd shut that in. In one site, they had a pretty low OPEX oil well that they would have kept running, but the downstream takeaway, which was it was tied in, like it had a pipeline for the gas, but the downstream gas infrastructure, because it was, I guess, there was a lot less gas being produced, they just shut it in. And so this well became stranded. And so if they didn't get it back online within a certain time frame, the mineral lease would expire, because you have to, depending, every mineral lease agreement can be different, but like generally you have to keep it productive. Like you have to keep producing. And if you don't, it can go up for expiry, and it can go back, depending on, like, if you're in Canada or the US, but in Canada, it can go back out for public auction and stuff like that. So it would have been extremely costly if, like, we didn't have a solution for them, which is like, okay, we'll bring our equipment on your site. It's a portable sales point, and gets rid of their gas vent problem at that time, and they could start it up the well again. So there was definitely a net negative for us, I would say. And then of course, no one has any money, and no one wants to spend any money when things are crazy like this. So like, we're not selling as much data centers, like, so sales slowed down. But then there was some upside too. Like, there was some new use cases that we got to explore.
Yeah, we're lucky at GAM that we launched our first deployment last December, and before we scale up considerably, we just wanted to have some live data for a considerable amount of time to be confident that we could scale running all these containers remotely. So we found ourselves in a position where we're still in, like, the data gathering sort of stage of our operation, and we learned a hard lesson, but a good lesson to learn at our point of operation, which is, like Steve was alluding to there, like, who has the rights to the minerals and where you are. So we were on a well pad that didn't get shut in, but because other well pads around the one that we were on got shut in, the pipeline of gas wound up getting more capacity, and so the pipeline had more capacity, and we were using gas, so they had the rights to call on. So they came and said, hey, we have more capacity in our pipeline, we're going to call on these rights, you guys can't consume this anymore. So we wound up getting kicked off that well pad, but it also allowed us to test out the portability of our machines. We were able to actually find a midstream provider only 40 miles down the road who was looking to offload some gas and unplug and move within a day and have everything up and running. So we learned that our containers are portable, and then more dynamics with the mineral rights owners and the pipelines and that whole interaction. And we're finding it's very nuanced depending on what state you're in.
Yeah. Steve, are you at liberty to share what some of those new rev streams or use cases that you discovered were?
Well, the one I was referring to, like, there's been like maybe 4 or 5 applications I've really promoted since the start. Like, I mean, my background is oil and gas facilities. So like, these were things that immediately I was like, oh, this Bitcoin mining thing really helps, right? Obviously flaring, like that's the super popular one. Venting as well. That's most of our applications are actually vented gas, because those, well, in Canada, it's a bit different. Venting's allowed in Canada to some degree, and it's worse for the environment, and there's regulations around it. So it's a really good fit for Bitcoin mining. But then like the other ones I've been trying to get into over the last few years were like mineral rights expiries, like using these little portable units, like even one little engine that we build, like we build these small 50 kilowatt packages, you could pick that up. And if an oil producer owns like just one unit, you can just use that as your portable sales point, right? Pick it up, drop it wherever you want when you need it to keep your mineral rights active. And so now that I actually got one done, that's what I find producers often need, is someone to show them like, okay, this is a case study, like this happened. And then if they need to talk to the people, they can call them up and say like, was this a good solution? So it was good to get that. And that's what COVID sort of forced upon this producer, was a situation which, we could alleviate that problem. But then there's other ones like, when you drill a new pad, for example, you might be drilling a pad site. You might have a plan to get rid of the gas. You're going to put the pipeline in, sell it to the midstream company. But sometimes, and this is obviously a huge problem in Texas and the area, like you're in Texas, right, Marty?
We're exploring. We have to confirm some immersion designs first, but yeah, we're talking.
Or were you in North Dakota or what?
We're in North Dakota.
Oh, okay.
All of our live deployments are in North Dakota right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so like a lot of, even on these like shale pads, like sometimes they don't budget for the right amount of gas that comes in or whatever. Like someone makes an error or it comes on strong or the schedules change and you end up having bottleneck pipelines. So I guess it sounds like, Marty, in your first case, like the producer, the pipeline was originally bottlenecked, but then due to what happened, it was not bottlenecked anymore. Capacity opened up, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So like, so basically Marty's application sounds like one where he could have debottlenecked the pipeline. If you put enough units on a pipeline that's constrained on volume, you can start, and you do it upstream of the pipeline, of course, like Marty was doing, but you reduce the amount of throughput that needs to go through that pipeline. So, pipeline debottlenecking is another one. And then of course, one that I haven't personally gotten much traction with yet, that is just a no-brainer. And I've had a lot of conversations with like midstream companies on this. And I know a lot of guys have, because we've had guys come to us for quotes and they're getting competitive quotes. But like when you're on a midstream gas plant or something, often you have like a genset running your plant. Like often that is the case. Sometimes you even have a redundant genset. You'll have a backup. And when you have these power plants that are either underloaded or idle, like just sitting doing nothing, like that's most of the battle is won, right? You have the fuel source, you have the power plant, you have the equipment. You just need to drop a Bitcoin mine in. So that's one that we haven't got as much traction as I was hoping, but it's a huge win too. Like there's so many different applications just in oil field, like for this stuff.
Yeah, and beyond that too, like getting to actual mineral rights owners is something that we're exploring. We're talking to a lot of mineral rights owners who, instead of getting a 12.5% royalty check, so the way what Steve was describing earlier, basically land owners will lease the land to operators who pull the oil out and sell it to market, and they get 87.5% of the revenue, and they give 12.5% royalty check to the person that owns the land. That's one way they could do it. The other way they could do it is take the gas in kind. So instead of getting a royalty check, we could say, hey, give me 12.5% of the gas that's moving through this pipeline and give it to me, and I'll do something with it. And you could mine Bitcoin with that. And when you compare it to the prices you get for selling it to the grid, we back tested the data, and Bitcoin mining is more profitable consistently, especially if you're using top of the line hardware.
Right. Because that was going to be one of the questions. It's just like, if people have an opportunity to sell their excess, the ability to generate power to the grid versus mining Bitcoin, I can get why that might be a more nuanced conversation, at least, I guess. But if you're just talking about taking waste gas or something that's stranded and allowing them to generate revenue from it by plopping in, a mining unit or one, of the nature of the kind that your companies make, like, I guess the question is, what is the response when you articulate that this is possible to the people that you're selling to? Because like my naive brain thinks, like, if you sat down and told me that you had a solution to this problem that I was having, or an ability to generate more revenue fairly like hassle free, I'd be pretty enthusiastic about it. Like what are the responses that people that you're talking to about this give you? Like, are they excited? Are they concerned? Like what's the stumbling block?
For us, it's hard to believe for most people. They're like, what? We can do that? Yeah, a lot of the operators are talking, they're focused on oil. Like they just want to get the oil to market, and the waste gas is like, whatever. And trying to get them over that hump of like, hey, this waste gas could be extremely profitable for you, and getting them to focus on it like that is a bit of a hurdle. Bitcoin education is a hurdle. A lot of these people simply don't understand Bitcoin and have some preconceived notions that need to be debunked, and it's just an education game. But again, since March, since the shut-ins, people have been more open, and we've been having more positive conversations.
Yeah, I would say over the years, like at first it was complete lack of credibility at the start. Like I mean, they had nothing to go by, whereas now if they, it's pretty much, I would say no longer do I go talk to a new producer we haven't been in front of before where they haven't heard of the idea of like mining Bitcoin on an oil or gas well.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty much. Like everyone in Calgary is like the Mecca for Canada. So word spreads pretty quickly there. So it didn't take long for word to even spread down there in like 2017, 18. But even like when I talk to US clients, everyone seems to know about it now. And now when I say know about it, they don't know the nuances of it. They don't know, okay, like how to maybe, a lot of my time is like I'm on the phone with them, evaluating their facility and seeing, is this a good application for you? And like going through all that detail stuff. But the credibility is there now. So they now I think generally take it pretty seriously. I'd say a lot of companies now have someone at least high level looking into it. And that's how we get found a lot now. People, I guess, find us online, but we get a lot of cold calls now, whereas before I spent 2 years getting no cold calls. Like it was just like me and my guy just doing our best to get the word out there. But right now I would say the hurdle right now is probably capital. Two things. One, like mining right now is very tight. Like mining revenue is basically an all-time low per kilowatt hour. So that doesn't help. But I don't think that's really limiting it, because we're still getting work. What's limiting it probably for us the most is capital, in terms of the producers have no money. Like, some of them do, some of them are really well financed. Like the big guys, of course, they got tons of money. But when COVID hit, when the oil prices went to like negative future prices, when there's tons of fear on like where oil is, what's going on with oil, and then of course add to that like the fear of the regulatory uncertainty. Like in Canada, there's been a bit of flip-flopping going on, especially in Alberta, on what's going on with the carbon tax, and no one really knows. Like it doesn't even seem even now anyone has a very clear picture of what to expect there, because our own like Alberta government has been pushing against it and has been aiming to like get rid of it. There's so much uncertainty there. So between that and the fact that most producers are cash strapped, and the cash they do have, like their shareholders expect them to make incremental reserves, like drill more wells, increase production, lower the cost of production, and this kind of stuff does play into that. But it's still a little early for them to take too much risk into it, I think, generally. But I guess it depends. Like some producers are definitely willing to take a bit more risk. Well, what I find is that we have a lot of success with our smaller units because they're more of a bite-sized investment, and they can buy a small unit, put it on their site. They get full transparency in how this would operate at scale. And they find an application where it solves a little problem, and they try it. And the idea, of course, is, if this works out well, this is how you would scale it up greater, right? But capital, I would say at this point, it's capital. That's why I sort of joke, like, if we get into like an oil price bull run, okay, where the oil price is booming, or a Bitcoin bull run, or hopefully both. Like I'm just dreaming for the day when we get both. Like oil has been in a bad spot for a number of years, like since like basically 2014. And all we need is one or the other or both to go up, and this industry is going to go insane. So,
and when you talk about like, is this business model or the product and service that you guys provide, is it conducive to something like, just to make the decision easier for these producers? Say like you rent the unit or you install it at zero cost and then you just do a profit share or something like that, so that it's easier to say yes to. Does anybody do that, or is that possible or viable?
Yeah, so that's one of our, that's another thing too. It's like it's so raw right now, this particular niche industry, mining on oil fields, that sorry, I got a motorcycle in the background. It's we're very transparent with our numbers and the fact that, hey, we recognize that this is foreign for you and we want to help you. We think this solution can really help you out as a producer, solve a lot of your problems, particularly with flaring, and we think it can be a profitable revenue stream for you in the future. We also have a thesis that oil and gas companies will be some of the biggest miners in the world at some point in the next decade, and we can see that you guys are going to figure out how to do this and at some point in the future, and we just want to help you quicken that learning curve. And so there are situations in which people will just give us gas, and then like we'll have to finance our own containers and bring them on, and we'll get to keep a portion of the Bitcoin and do like a small revenue share. But the capital is definitely the problem right now. Specifically, a lot of people don't want to finance. It's hard to get financing for the mining hardware at good rates, because it's such a risky asset to hold in your balance sheet, where the generators are a better hard asset to have and are a little bit easier to finance. But it's still trying to thread that needle of working with the producers depending on how much they're willing to invest, and then if they don't have the capital, finding the capital on our end and getting the containers.
Right. Yeah, I was going to add, so when you guys are referring to capital, you mean on both sides, like the producers don't necessarily have the capital and you guys don't either. Is that the situation?
I mean, we think we're pretty confident that we can get capital again, but also we're trying to scale. We're trying to scale. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin, and so we don't want to bite off more than we can chew. We don't want to overpromise. That's another unfortunate thing that's happened in the mining industry in North America. There's been a lot of bullshit throughout the years, so we're trying to be extra cautious not to oversell anything and just be completely upfront and as transparent as possible, and just again bite off as much as we're able to chew. And the conversation around capital on our end are getting easier too as well compared to earlier this year, especially considering, Steve, you probably noticed this too, with all the well shut-ins too, the generator prices have taken a cut too, so that helps bring down overall power production costs, which makes it a little bit more appealing.
Yeah, that is one of the upsides. And of course the upside with mining being sort of not as profitable as the ASIC hardware pricing gets better too. I agree. Like I've had my financing problems were always at the start. Well, certainly even now, actually, like any traditional financing route that we try, like first of all, all the banks I've worked with, and I still work with, won't finance me at all. Like because we're a Bitcoin related company.
Really?
Even after 3 years of growth, like every year revenue increasing, profits increasing, everything showing like a good business model. They won't finance us.
They say that outright. It's like, it's because you're involved in Bitcoin.
Yes. Yeah. Because I'm unapologetic on my website. It's all about Bitcoin. Whereas you look at some of our competition, they don't even mention it. Right. And that's why, like, I don't blame them, because that's why you do it, because there's problems in the space. Insurance, as soon as my insurance provider, who was giving me my normal insurance on like commercial general liability insurance, and actually at the start, I don't do this anymore, but I used to insure our equipment. That was all fine until they found out we were a Bitcoin company. They looked on my website and they said, your rates are going up. So I dropped them and have tried to find someone else, but I couldn't find as good a rate as I had. The Canada Revenue Agency, they withheld money from us for about 8 months now. Money they owed us, like in a credit due to like a GST we export to the States, right? So we don't charge sales tax and we get that back. they didn't give it back until it was actually last week. They finally let it through. So miners get discriminated against already. And that's one thing I talk about a lot. And I think it's going to get maybe worse in the future. I hope not. I hope that things like this Microstrategy announcement, bigger names giving it more credibility, us getting more traction, all this will end up being a net positive, and we'll see less of this discrimination. But it's very, very much a real thing. And most miners know this already. Like, it's very tough to get, even now, even though I've got financing options now on, like, when I come up with lease agreements with producers, like rental, we do, like you were talking about, we do other things like rental. We do stuff like, we can put our stuff on there for nothing if they do certain things, like share, like basically pay us a small rental fee or something like that. But we just do a variety of models, but generally the financing has been tough. You almost have to get it through a private firms, it seems like.
Yeah. And to your point there, Steve, that's why we've been trying to be more public at GAM about what we're doing. And you've been leading the charge for 3 years. Like, I think, especially considering all the Bitcoin's boiling the oceans FUD out there, and Bitcoin consumes too much energy. It's important as miners in North America to get out in front of this and really control the narrative and say, hey, this is actually helping clean up waste gas, make oil producers more financially secure, which in turn makes your country more energy independent, and the prospects of that brighter. And then one thing we're going to look to hone in on and really use as a benchmark to sort of prove that we're helping the economy here in North America is the energy intensity index, and prove that you're getting more economic value per energy unit consumed because of Bitcoin mining. And that's, I think, up to this point, certainly miners have been discriminated against, but when you understand and you're this close to what's going on, it's hard to deny that it is a net positive and a benefit for economies and the energy sector overall.
Well, it kind of makes me think of what we said right at the beginning of, a company like MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor being orange pilled by all the content that is coming out by, great content creators and writers and stuff in the space. I mean, maybe it's just a matter of there needs to be more, comms and more content and stuff like that around what you guys do and why it's so beneficial for, pretty much all parties involved. And maybe the narrative will start to change on it. I know, that's kind of a slow approach, but I'm sure, Marty, that's probably some of the work you're doing over at GAM, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the drum I'm trying to beat personally when I can, because again, it's a no-brainer in my mind. Like, it'd be stupid to hinder this industry. It's beneficial, again, for GDP and energy security, which is they're at the top of the list of wants for America as a country, particularly. Like, why did the shut-ins happen in March? Because we were beholden to supply fuckery with Saudi Arabia and Russia. Like, if we're able to create alternative revenue streams to make our producers more profitable, not completely inoculated from that, but it gives us a little bit more leverage against fuckery like that. So
totally. Steve, weren't you talking a few months ago about, I don't know if you were, I don't think you were doing a formal raise, but you had conversations. I think you said something like, I talked to a billionaire who wants to invest, but not ideologically aligned. So I said no, sort of thing.
Well, basically this guy, I won't name him. I was joking because, like, he called me up. I wasn't doing a raise. He just called me up, and so I took the call. His assistant emailed me, asked to set up a call. So took the call. I was very interested in see what he wanted.
Naturally.
Yeah, naturally, billionaire. Right? I don't think I've ever talked to a billionaire. Maybe I have. I just don't know it, right? So anyway, he called me up, and he had found my company. I guess he had a similar concept that he wanted to do. He wanted to invest in a company, but he didn't care about the Bitcoin mining thing. He wanted to do, like, what do you call it? Edge computing, cloud computing, sort of like probably the biggest name in the space, like that what we do is like Crusoe Energy, like they're a competitor. And they market, I don't know what they do. I know they do some kind of like GPU rig stuff, right? And I think they're doing some kind of maybe edge computing. I don't even know what that term means, to be quite honest with you. Like it's something to do with like CFD, like computational fluid dynamic, like crunching. Like so you're using GPU rigs instead of mining Bitcoin, you're renting out your hardware, GPU rigs and maybe CPUs or FPGAs or something. So a non-Bitcoin mining data center for more of a traditional application and doing that in oil field. And I told the guy, I was like, I'm a pretty straight shooter. Like I probably could have massaged that and got him interested. But I just said, look, man, like I see I come from oil, like the value proposition here is Bitcoin mining scales really well to consume energy, and it doesn't need very much data, and it doesn't need very much overhead. And this is all what we want on oil sites. And you don't want the pumper having to be a specialist in like these edge computers and like figuring stuff out on site and like getting IT out there and figuring shit out. You just want it to run and churn and consume energy, and that's what Bitcoin's really good at. So I told the guy like I don't really see there's potential there, and I know people have done it or maybe are looking at it, and it's even something that I could see at some point in the future, like us branching out into and doing prototypes. I was like, look, man, that's not what I'm interested in, and that's it. So yeah,
we got asked about that last week too, and we're like, no, we're not focused on that at all, and I don't think it's wise to be focused on that yet, considering the upward potential of Bitcoin's price appreciation. Like you should be all focused on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not like Bitcoin is a long cry from scaling to like actually conserving and reducing most of the gas that's being wasted. It's not even close. Like we need the price to go way higher, right? So this whole cloud computing thing, like that has no chance in hell of ever capturing all of the waste gas in an oil field. However, Bitcoin actually has a chance in hell of doing that. Like if the Bitcoin economy grows big enough and the mining economy is big enough and the rewards are big enough, it could actually get there one day. Maybe, I don't know if it'll be in our lifetime or later, but one day perhaps. But this whole cloud computing, it doesn't. So it just seems like it's more of like it's like one of those things. It's a good story. It's a good narrative. You're doing cloud computing and I don't know, folding proteins or whatever, but it doesn't fucking matter. Like we're trying to get rid of gas, like not get rid of it or just use it. We're trying to use the gas, and the Bitcoin does it the best.
Yeah. On that note, Marty, you've been talking a lot about, energy companies are the banks of the future, and kind of, on the point that Steve was just making about how big this can scale to, and I guess the implications of how, important this service, this industry could be. Can you articulate your thoughts on that for us to discuss?
Yeah. And just to be clear, this is a theory I have in my head, could be wrong, could not.
Sure.
But, just to me, naturally, when you compare the opportunity that Steve just laid out with all the gas that could be potentially consumed via Bitcoin mining, if these oil and gas producers own the operations that do this mining. And so Bitcoin mining is the way that Bitcoin is distributed to the network, and the way blocks are added to the network, and for that miners get fees that sit on their balance sheet that they can then distribute. And when you compare it to how money is currently distributed to the system via a central bank, these oil producers, if they do become the largest miners in the world, these energy sector, it could be renewable energy producers as well, they replace the source of the money distribution, which is the central bank, the Fed window. So I just like comparing it to that, to me, that conceptually makes a bit of sense to me. And then especially when you think of a future in which we potentially transition to a Bitcoin standard and everything's priced in Bitcoin, and people are able to do interesting things, miners particularly able to do interesting things with financing, hash rate and stuff like that. And I don't know, just conceptually, Bitcoin was made to replace central banks, and if Bitcoin mining is the way that Bitcoin is new money is distributed compared to the Fed window, just like conceptually to me, it makes sense that the energy sector producers would be replacing these central banks as the distributor of the money.
I think that's totally right. Like completely logical. Like, well, energy companies they're the upstream end of the economy. Like all the economy, it consumes energy. It starts with the producers and it trickles down the economy. So yeah, I say you'll see Bitcoin miners, and it's going to be dominated by the energy industry. Like even on the utilities, like I mean, if you have a hydro dam, and like if you're in China, and I don't know if they have any private hydro dams, I'm guessing they're all government owned to some degree. But I mean, if you have a private power grid or power ability to generate power, why would you even bother with a third party? Like just mine it yourself. Like it's so easy at this point, and hardware's getting so cheap. So I think we are slowly transitioning to the energy producers are going to dominate Bitcoin mining across the board. And we're upstream oil and gas. Like I'm an oil and gas maximalist, right? Like that's what I joke about, but I am. But it's like the oil and gas industry fuels like, and basically the oil and gas industry fuels like basically the entire world, like everything, even all the secondary energy generation methods, like the renewables and stuff. You can't manufacture that shit without oil and gas, like generally. So we're like the upstream part of the entire economy in the oil and gas industry. You're going to see it dominate mining, and I know Marty agrees with that. And I think yeah, I don't know. Central banking doesn't have a bright future. Banks do. Banks might, but central banking doesn't.
Yeah. And when you say something like how would those operations stack up to these big mining operations that we're seeing popping up in the States? Obviously, China has a legacy of it. Some in northern Canada, Quebec, Labrador. Like, do you think the oil and gas miners of Bitcoin, in the type of way that your respective companies provide, do you think they outcompete those larger mines?
Oh yeah, like we did a back of the napkin calculation based off of 2018 flare reports from the EIA, and we made some assumptions. We assumed, number one, that it was pipeline quality gas, which we know is not the case for all the flared gas. Some is too wet to be pipeline quality. A lot of it is. Yeah. We assumed a conversion efficiency rate of 33%, which is around where we're seeing with our generators. And then those were the assumptions that we made, and we calculated that based off the report numbers from the EIA, and I think it's CEBI, which is the Cambridge, whatever it's called. They basically say that there's probably Bitcoin miners probably consuming about, I think it's like 8.61 gigawatts of energy right now. So we took those numbers and calculated like, hey, with these assumptions, if Bitcoin miners were to cap and consume all that gas, the network hash rate would be 7.35 times what it is now. And so we think that's actually the right ballpark, because like Steve has pointed out too, like a lot of the flaring goes unreported. So we're just going
yes.
We're just going off reported numbers. That's off reported numbers alone. And if you sort of factor in that all the reported numbers aren't going to be pipeline quality, but then you factor in the unreported numbers, that's probably like the right ballpark, probably actually a little bit higher.
Yeah, I did a similar calculation a while back, but I was looking at what price would Bitcoin have to be to like make a big dent in the flare gas stuff, and I think it was like 2 million like per coin, just to be like, just based on scaling without I made a bunch of assumptions. Actually, it's on YouTube. It's on that Fidelity mining summit, but it was like $2 million like Bitcoin would have to be just to even start to make a dent into the flare gas. But I mean, yeah, I get that question like a lot. Like, a lot of people are critical of like oil and gas being the future of mining, and I don't think they see the future very clearly, because first of all, like a lot of these projects that we see miners flock to, like the hydro, These projects were massively subsidized by the government. In Newfoundland, right? Like in Labrador, these were either subsidized by like Muskrat Falls in Labrador, or were subsidized by the government. Hydro in general is subsidized by the government. So that subsidy creates this arbitrage opportunity because, well, one, like they have all this excess power they can't get rid of, so of course miners are going to come in. But it's also a very easy application to mine Bitcoin. So like I've heard, like, sort of anecdotally, I don't have any data, but like even the Chinese, like in the Chinese wet season, over time, their power prices per kilowatt hour are slowly going up a bit because the competition is just getting higher and higher and higher in China for that power. It's such a low hanging fruit. And once you get the data centers built out, competition just to plug in more mines on those applications, like I think you're going to see those really cheap power sources like in hydro, which has been popularly what miners have flocked to in the past. It's just going to get more expensive, and it's going to take a lot before that same effect happens in the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas has a bit different challenges, obviously, because you need to build a genset. You need to have a power plant to apply to the energy source, but it's going to take immense amount of capital before the oil and gas industry, all these low hanging fruit options, like these, basically the flare gas, vent gas, underloaded engines, all this stuff gets consumed by Bitcoin miners. Like there's so much of it. We have more options than like we can capitalize, basically, with the amount of, every producer has so many different options that we could potentially do a project with. But again, the whole capital constraint issue, and also the payout, like it's got to pay out and be profitable. Yeah. But I would bet, well, I have bet everything on the oil and gas industry is going to dominate this industry in the future, right?
The underutilized genset opportunity is one that like blew my mind. It's holy shit, like these what is it, 350 kilowatt gensets could only be consuming 250 kilowatts. You can use that 100 left over that's not being utilized to mine Bitcoin. Like
it's crazy. And
the efficiencies get so granular, it's mind blowing.
And I've there's cases where like guys, they got these monster gens, like 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt gens on these gas plants, like I was mentioning. And if throughput is down, right, like if the facility is no longer consuming as much power as what it was sized for, because the oil patch went to shit, like in prices, right? And now throughput's down. Now you have these engines running at partial load. They're already running load banks. Like load banks is common in oil field. Like so, load bank is just basically a big box of resistors. Like you send the power to the resistors to create heat, and you do that to keep the engine loaded. Because if you run the engine at low load, like let's say it's a 1 megawatt genset and you're only running it at 15% load, if it's like reciprocating engine, you're going to have head swings you're going to have to do on that thing all the time, like based on something to do with I think it's carbon buildup, based on how a combustion process works at low load. I'm not an expert on that, but it's costly maintenance. So like throwing a load bank in there, even just wasting the gas and the energy, is still profitable for them because they have to keep their engines healthy. And it's such an easy sell, it should be, just to swap that load bank out with a Bitcoin mine, which is a smart load bank. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess the genesis of my question was like, will this form of mining continue to be economically viable into the future with more efficient, large scale operations? But I guess what you guys just kind of said is like, it'll probably continue to compete even better with the legacy mining operations because there's so many options for oil and gas producers to monetize waste or existing operations through Bitcoin mining. That, like, am I hearing this correctly? Like, you guys think that maybe the majority of Bitcoin mining will move to this type of mining?
Well, I think so. And also remember, like a lot of grids are fueled by fossil fuels, like natural gas power plants, if not coal. Coal is getting obviously out of favor, but a lot of coal is switching over to natural gas. Yeah, even I don't know exactly what's going on in like Texas, like those Texas ERCOT system everyone's been talking about, but I'm sure some of it is fed by fossil fuels, and you always pay more downstream. Okay, the further you are downstream from the source, you always pay more. So, I mean, I know in Texas too, with the huge amount of capital being sunk into like not solar, wind, I think, has created periods where, you know, of real very cheap power, where I know of several different mining outfits that have been targeting that application. I don't know, Marty, if you know anyone that's been very successful down there, but I know like even Storms, your partner there, was targeting the wind stuff. And I see that as obviously being a great application for Bitcoin as well. But I don't know, like I think a lot of these grids are fed by, like, a lot of these guys with cheap power, they're fed by like natural gas. Like, you're going to get cheaper natural gas further upstream.
Yeah. And everybody we speak with out in the field, they don't think natural gas price is going to rise considerably. Like the amount of supply that's hitting the market, especially when you consider that flare can now be consumable via Bitcoin mining. It's we think the opportunity to mine cheaply on these properties is going to be pretty consistent to the foreseeable future.
Have you guys talked to any large power generators? Like Steve, you mentioned Muskrat Falls here in Newfoundland. It's a large hydro dam project, heavily subsidized by the government, if not completely. Way over budget by like 2 or 3x, I think, something like that. And lots of excess capacity, et cetera, et cetera. Like, do you guys focus exclusively on smaller producers right now, because that's obviously how you've designed your products? Or have you had conversations with just people in general that have a whack of excess power and looking for something to do with it?
Well, for us, I've always focused on oil and gas, because even by the time I got into this thing in like 2016 was when I was really planning my business. And even back then, like, everybody was already like pitching grid operators and trying to get in on cheap power, getting located next to substations, et cetera. Like, especially in all the hydro, like obviously in 2017, there was a huge, at least in Canada, in Quebec, there was a huge flocking of miners to Quebec, and before they put like moratorium on things. Right now, like, as a supplier of data centers, like, so I position my business to be like, we're a supplier first and foremost. Like, I'm starting to look into supplying grid miners, and I don't know if you can hear me. It seems like my mic is cutting out. Okay. I'm starting to look at maybe supplying and targeting more of the grid guys as well, because our stuff is still quite suitable for that. And being from Newfoundland, like, I actually have a friend that we're looking at maybe putting a proposal together, because Newfoundland has this famous Newfoundland and Labrador, the province of Newfoundland and Labrador has this famous, like, widely considered like one of the worst contracts in Canadian history. They're selling power to Quebec. Quebec, basically back in the day, Quebec financed this hydro dam, Churchill Falls, and at least Newfoundland made a bad decision to lock the power rate in over the entirety of the contract without accounting for inflation. And so now they're selling Quebec's power at 0.2, what is it? It's like 0.2 cents, I think, or 0.02 cents per kilowatt hour.
And it's a 100-year contract.
Yeah, it's up in like 2049 or 2069 or something. It's horrible. It's horrible. And I mean, so there's not much revenue being, or if any, really, even covering op costs on that place.
So stupid.
Yeah, and so I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer for like a province like that, like my home province in Newfoundland, to really take this seriously and do everything they can to attract Bitcoin miners into the province. Even if it only means that, even if they only get 0.4 cents, like if it's double 0.2 cents, like whatever they have to do, like, so yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. And, you know, I'm not connected to the industry at all, but, you know, out of my love for my home province and knowing the situation that they're heading into, you know, macroeconomic wise, I would love if they had a little bit of an open mind and, you know, had a look at this stuff and looked at the options available to them, because I think there might be some intriguing ones there.
Yeah.
Are you guys ready if, like, you know, Steve, you mentioned if oil moons or if Bitcoin moons or both, like, are you guys ready for a dramatic increase in demand? Like, is that something you can scale up quickly? Are you, you know, are your processes and your product and service ready for that? Like, because, you know, gradually then suddenly,
Yeah.
who the hell knows?
Yeah, we could scale up our containers. Just a matter of whether or not the hardware, the ASIC manufacturers can keep up with demand at this point, right?
What's going on with the manufacturers? There's no, like, is there anything available right now?
Yeah, there's stuff available. The Bitmain's in a bit of trouble. We're very happy at Great American Mining that we made a strategic decision to go with MicroBT and their What's Miner ASICs. The situation of Bitmain is not looking good. It seems like Jihan and McCree have separated, and one is holding the chip manufacturing and one is holding the ASIC construction part, and they're not cooperating with each other. So that's delayed a lot of orders for Bitmain S17s and S19s particularly. And then on top of that, they lost their lead chip designer of the S9 to MicroBT. The gentleman who started MicroBT designed the S9, and I don't, probably because of that, I would contribute it to that. The S17s and S19s have had much higher failure rates than the S9s did, while the MicroBT M20Ss, M30Ss, M30S Plus have not had anywhere near the failure rate. So yeah, right now it's like we're hoping that MicroBT can up production, because we do think demand is going to increase significantly.
I wouldn't touch Bitmain with a 10-foot pole right now, man.
Right.
I mean, like, that's all I hear. Like, I haven't bought new Bitmain gear myself, but I've had a couple clients that did, and they've been burned with failures, pretty bad too, like over 50% failure rate.
It's untenable. Like,
it's ridiculous. And I mean, I don't know, Bitmain is obviously going through that internal struggle. So there's just red flags everywhere. I think anyone would be crazy to buy new Bitmain gear until they demonstrate that they can be a good supplier again. And honestly, I don't think I would never even qualify them as a good supplier. They always had sort of, I would call, poor quality. Like even back when S9s were the thing, like it was known that like at least 5% of your new hardware would be fail out of the box. Like that was common. They're just, and then of course all the drama over the years, like not accepting Bitcoin as payment and going for Bitcoin Cash and stuff. Like you'd be crazy to talk to them about like supplying you hardware right now. But seems I agree with Marty. I think if I was, I basically recommend to anyone that wants new, like definitely go with MicroBT right now. And I think reliability is important. Like I think this industry's got to get better at building more reliable hardware, like not having as much quality problems out of the box, you know, just easier, like better means to replace like faulty gear and stuff, and just having that. I think it'll get there. It's just probably a thing. It's such a new industry. But it does seem almost like there is a supply problem right now. Some people that know a lot more about it than me have been talking about just not getting even MicroBT, like not getting as much allocation at the foundries, like for chips. I don't know if you've been hearing that, Marty. Like that's what we've heard on, I think in some of the groups me and Marty are in. I've heard that, and I've heard that rumors elsewhere. So it's sort of weird right now. You'd think that if you look at the hash rate, it's actually been pretty flat, like over the last while. It's been going up, but we're at close to we're at basically all-time highs, but it's not been going up like it has been in the past. And I just don't believe that these guys are selling out like crazy. I think it's just a supply problem. Like it needs to get better, I think, because pricing needs to come back to earth. too.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm pretty sure like all new orders, like pre-orders, are sold out until like next June or something like that for MicroBT. You can still get hardware that's already out there on the market, but yeah, it is getting scarcer. And to speak to reliability of the Watts miners, like we've been running in oil fields for almost a year now. We haven't had one failure. So these machines are beast. And I think I heard something about MicroBT trying to like dissolve themselves outside and re-domicile themselves outside of China, which would actually be really bullish. But yeah, the time on the foundry floor is very important, and that rumor is swirling around. But hopefully, the price of Bitcoin recovers or starts rallying and changes that reality. Yeah, because it is interesting. It would suck to have a bunch of demand from these producers and the hardware supply chain to sort of sputter and not be able to keep up with demand.
So that's seeming like the most likely bottleneck right now. It's just the hardware. Like if you guys got a surge in demand.
Yeah. But we're confident and that's why we tell producers, and we're very methodical about how we scale up. We don't want to over deliver, take on a bunch of contracts and not be able to get hardware. So we're going to do things when we're confident we can fill our containers with miners.
What do you guys? You had something, Steve?
Oh no.
What do you guys make of the hash rate right now? Like both from a business perspective, how you frame it with your clients, and just as Bitcoiners, what do you make of it?
I watch the hash rate like a trader watches the price. Like I'm addicted to it, and I make all kinds of stupid comments, like tweets about it, just because it's fun. But like, yeah, it's something I'm always watching. Like recently, it's been pumping like crazy, or at least block times have been very quick. And so it's always like, concerning. It's like, oh, is it going to jump a lot this adjustment period? And you're sort of wondering, because it has a material impact, because, all my clients they're now watching it too. Like, just like they watch the oil price, like they want to see what are their rigs earning them, and they're wanting to know where it's going. And I mean, what I found the most surprising was how high the hash rate has stayed. Like, to be quite honest, like after the halving, and it corrected down a bit, but then it just very quickly recovered, and it's still extremely high for what I would expect when you look at just what the hash is worth. Like because you can allocate a value for the hash based on how much revenue is being earned, and it's not that great. Like, and I just I know of a lot of miners like over the years who had power costs that would barely even be affordable, even with like the newest gear, like with like M30s and stuff. And so I'm sure a lot of those guys are now out of business, but it sort of boggles my mind, actually, like where all this money is coming from, when people must just be speculating immensely on where the price is going and where the revenue per kilowatt hour is going, or revenue per hash. Because I just like, even a lot of these really cream the crop grid mines, like, man, they're not making any money at these rates. Like, they're forced to upgrade computers, and if the hardware depreciation, if things don't get better, is just going to kill them.
Yeah, I would assume that people are speculating on price appreciation as well in holding. Actually, we've run like.
That's why when you become a miner, you're sort of like, you're trying to rein people in on the like on the bullish memes, and like the price going to the moon, and like that maybe that's what has always made me try. Like I never have the same expectations or the same euphoria as people do when the price goes up. Like I have euphoria when the hash rate goes down. That's like when I'm like, like.
Yeah. No, we're looking at it now. Like we're 522 blocks away from the next retarget, which will be an 11% increase, which is pretty insane at these levels. And yeah, I think well, to speak to like the holding strategy, particularly for gas miners, for miners mining off waste gas, or even mineral rights owners that get their royalty checks selling to Henry Hub pipeline down in the Permian. Like, we've run the numbers. Like, if you were to like do like a blended HODL and sell for OPEX strategy, it's much more profitable than selling the gas to a pipeline. I'm not saying that's the reason why hash rate is where it is now, but the HODL strategy from a miner perspective may be more popular if gas mining becomes more predominant.
Right. Do you think people are just front running the stock to flow? It's become so pervasive and so much hopium around the stock to flow that this is what someone comes in and just slams down on their investors table and says, this is why we want to build $100 million mine.
Well, I know you just triggered Steve.
I know.
I will say,
Yeah.
I'll say on this is like, stock to flow is like a nice to like look at. I hate when people lead with it. Like, look at this chart. This is where Bitcoin's going. Like, it's like, hey, up to this point, it has followed this model and it is looking like it could continue to, but like, it's a nice to point to. I don't like to lead with it ever.
Yeah, I don't think I just see it as like a poor, it is what it is. Like, it's a model, it's predicting what it's predicting, but like, to use it, like, I would never be able to go use that. And I just know what my customers would say if I walked into the boardroom and did a presentation on the stock to flow model as why the price is going where it is and why they should invest in my mind. Like, these people are very rational, critical thinkers. They wouldn't buy into that. It's there's nothing negative about it. Like, it's not necessarily even false, but I have to sell them on, okay, like, why this is good for your facility, why it's a good investment, it's a portable asset, there's no sunk costs. Like, there's all kinds of reasons I can sell them on these things, but like, to try to sell someone on that, like, I find like it's the trader types, like traders like that shit. And I don't know, miners, like a lot of miners I talk to don't really care for it. Like, it's not really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you guys are too rational to use that for something like that. I'm just saying, like, to try to explain this irrational exuberance in the hash rate, like, because something's got to be like, some people feel the whole price follows hash rate thing. Maybe it's the stock to flow, but why the fuck are people investing so much money in mining right now? They're thinking that it's going to become profitable at some point in the not too distant future. And, the stock to flow model has been a very popular thing passed around to predict some of that.
It could even be something like delayed shipments of miners are just getting in and people want to plug them in as quickly as possible. Like,
right.
Bitmain's had notorious delays this year, so if people have already spent that money and they need to make it back, plugging their shit in is a way to do that.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're bumping up on 90 minutes here, and I want to be respectful of your time and let you guys go. But is there anything that we haven't touched on that you guys are either super excited about, or you think it's important for people to be considering about this, or unique bits of information that people can chew on? Like, is there anything that we haven't touched that we should?
I think just echo and really drive home the fact that this application can do incredible things for the energy sector and the sovereignty of North America specifically. And not only that, it can be applied globally if you can figure it out in other areas of the world that produce this. And that would lead to a much more anti-fragile world, in my opinion. Countries less beholden to other countries doing other things with supply of oil and gas. And again, to drive home the fact that this creates very granular efficiencies that are mind-blowing. Like, especially in a time and age where climate change is a huge contentious topic. I think this is a really beautiful story and narrative to say, hey, we're actually going to help this, and let's be as efficient as possible as we can. And Bitcoin mining provides the avenue to do all that.
Preach.
Yeah. I mean, that's I just mirror all that. Like, oil and gas producers just have a pretty tough time having to deal with a lot of bullshit, FUD in society about what they do. I could go on, I could do a whole nother podcast on this, but like, it's good. I think it's, Bitcoin and applying the whole Bitcoin mining thing to oil field is going to be great. to show how oil field producers can operate more efficiently and like conserve more of the energy they're producing. And there's really like I honestly don't think there's any application for spending. You cannot spend capital in any other way and do more for, even though while I don't really care for this whole thing like carbon emissions reduction, than you can by applying it in oil fields. So yeah, people should keep paying attention. It's going to get bigger.
Steve, how do you become carbon neutral?
Yo, ask that to safe. Ask that to safe. You got to kill yourself, apparently. Not my words. Not my words.
Well, I'm a huge fan of what you guys are doing. I think this is such an interesting industry to watch and for you guys to be a part of and building out. So I guess thank yous are in order for you guys doing that work, because I think there's going to be a lot of benefit to be derived from it. Destinations that you guys want to send people if they want to check you guys out, or the companies, learn more, hit you up, that sort of thing.
My website, it's upstreamdata.ca.
Yeah. And we're gam.ai is our website, and we've been doing weekly webinars catered towards oil and gas producers that want to learn more about how they can utilize Bitcoin mining to be more efficient with their operations. So if you're in the oil and gas industry and you want to learn more, go to our website and we'll email you with a webinar invite.
Nice. Many people attending those?
I think the highest has been like 15 at a time. It's been sort of under the radar. It's just been, we've been having a lot of calls, and instead of having 10 calls a week, let's just have a webinar and have a Q&A with it.
Sick. All right, boys. Well, look, I appreciate the time, and good luck on in future endeavors. I'm sure we'll talk again in the not too distant future.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for having